From Calexico to Nunavut, from the Aleutian Islands, all the way to Newfoundland, and through Denver, Colorado. Welcome to the Dynasty Pulse. I'm Biggs. He's Greinberg. We are Greinberg and Biggs. And we have a great guest today. Josh Larky is here in studio from playerprofiler.com and other places around the web. Josh, introduce yourself and let everybody know where they can find your stuff, because it's great stuff.
Guys, thanks for having me. I would just say go to Twitter, JLarky Tweets. I'm figuring out my next move, interviewing with some companies. We'll figure out what's going on. But right now, I've got the weekly podcast for Player Profiler, The Dominator. And I will be posting a lot of content on Twitter, including Dynasty Rankings, that with a trade value chart that should come out next week. So that'll be the big one. Is we'll process all this combine info this weekend. I know my girlfriend loves that when she's, what are we doing on Sunday? And I said, oh, Sunday's for processing combine stats. Didn't you know? So I'm excited. This is a good time of year. And I just think the draft process in general is always very fun, because you are essentially watching careers blossom. All these, trying to figure out which college kids are going to end up being the next stars of tomorrow. So I've always enjoyed prospecting, and I know Player Profiler, that whole universe is very huge into dynasty, into rookies, and this is a great time of year.
Yeah, and rookies are what drives dynasty. We have, for the second week in a row, it's a Player Profiler party up in here. And Josh, you are a free agent, so we can find your stuff at Player Profiler, but go find Josh Larky on Twitter. That's where you can get into everything. Now, you may not realize this because you probably don't scour the usernames in the leagues, but in the Larky League in 2023, Mike Greinberg came in fourth, and you edged me out in the last week of the regular season to take the 8th spot for the last spot in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. You and I both finished with 13 and 15 records. 13 and 15. You made the playoffs. I got cut out. I sent you a trade offer to try and help my chances, and you never responded. And then we had the last week of the season. Everything went away, and the last week I had a terrible, terrible week, and you wound up beating me out by 60 points or something like that. And I went from like worst, like bottom of the league. I had a really bad like first five weeks, and then worked my way back into contention. But congratulations to Josh Larky on beating me out of a playoff spot in the Larky League.
That was definitely not one of my finest drafts. Took the 7th round gamble on Jonathan Taylor, which didn't really work out. I had T. Higgins, I had Mike Williams, I had Jamar Chase. There were a lot of underperformers on that squad. So maybe I just didn't motivate them enough. I'm not quite sure. So
on our weekly podcast, Mike and I would talk constantly, and Aaron Jones was the big. I thought I was doing such a good thing in that draft by waiting on running backs a little bit and then seizing on Aaron Jones because he was going to have such a great year, and then he absolutely tanked me. So yeah, that wasn't fun. But thank you for hopping in with us tonight. Basically, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about rookies, because rookies are what drives dynasty. And with the combine coming up, all of the position players that we care about go on Saturday. Some of your IDP leagues you have going today. We got some good combine numbers today. And tight ends are coming, I think, tomorrow. And then Saturday is running backs, quarterbacks, wide receivers. Offensive linemen finish up on Sunday. So in your dynasty leagues, you want to be tracking these guys. There are some key metrics that are out there for what we're looking for. So follow the combine numbers. Look for these metrics, and we're going to be giving you each 5 guys that you can watch in the combine and tail them, track their progress and everything, and see where they're gonna get slotted in your rookie drafts.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna get into some news of the league right now. There's only like a couple points here that we're gonna cover and how it impacts football and fantasy football.
Sorry, hang on, Mike. Hey, producer, do we have an intro video?
Yes, let's show them the intro. All right, we are back after that
We're
wicked
back.
intro. Wicked intro. And I know, hopefully, Josh, do you have a bunch of water there? I know that you drink a lot of water. I listened to your podcast the other day and you were taking a couple water breaks. So making sure, yes, fully hydrated, my friend. Awesome stuff. Some of the news we're going to talk about. There's a lot of rumors floating around the league right now, and Justin Fields is at the top of the list. There was some leaked footage yesterday on Twitter. I saw him celebrating when hearing some news that he may be being acquired by the Atlanta Falcons. So what do we think about that? Where does that drive us? Is that something that we think is actually going to happen in the league, or is Justin Fields going to be? We know he's probably going to be on a new team here, but you think Atlanta is going to be the front runner?
I think it will be. I bet on Atlanta at 6-1 odds a few weeks ago to land him, and that is completely off the board in all the betting markets. So I think they're assuming at this point that's probably going to happen. I think it's great for him this year. Still not someone that I'm very interested in long term.
Yeah.
I think we're going to need to see a lot from Justin Fields this year. I think a lot of people forget that a rookie contract quarterback is so different from a second and onward contract quarterback. And right now, I don't think Justin Fields has at all played like he deserves to be a starter after his rookie contract. So this is year 4, and I think it's to be a big one. He'll have a good offensive line, a great supporting cast, but at the same time, new coaching staff, new players, and a lot of pressure and a prove it year for him.
And that's the big thing that people tend to forget about in fantasy football is real life. And Justin Fields' efficiency metrics are not good. They were better last year than they have been, but he still is not a winning quarterback by most measures, especially DVOA. And one of my favorite tweets today was in reference to Desmond Ridder when somebody said, "We have Justin Fields at home."
Yes, exactly. They have the same quarterback there. Yeah, I agree with that. And he takes way too many sacks. He doesn't get the ball out quick enough. There are a lot of alarming things that are going on there. And he'll have a better supporting cast and a better offensive line. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I'm with you guys long term. I don't think he's going to be a guy that's going to be a starter for too many more years. This is
love him and redraft him best ball.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Now, we got some other news here. Zach Wilson has been granted permission to seek a trade. I don't think anything's going to develop there. He'll just be a complimentary guy, backup position. What do you guys think about that? Do you think he's going to get anywhere?
What about Marquez Valdez-Scantling?
Well, that's the next one, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have no Zach Wilson thoughts. I think he is essentially turning into Trey Lance now, where Trey Lance went to the Cowboys and has probably been banished forever. I think Zach Wilson's probably banished at this point. So
I think Trey Lance still has more upside than Zach Wilson, but
yeah. And then, like you said, MVS got released. Not surprising there. The Chiefs need to make some cap room to sign some of their bigger names. He might find some work somewhere as a complimentary guy, but you're not looking much there. As for the Falcons, they released Jonnu Smith. So all these Kyle Pitts truthers, they're rejoicing right now. What do we all think about the Pitts move? Do you think that's a good move for him? And well, obviously Jonnu Smith is just Jonnu Smith, but what's going on with Kyle Pitts in that situation?
I love the move for Pitts owners, and he's very highly rated on my tight ends going into the 2024 season. I think he's going to have a better year than he has been. It also does a lot for my hometown boy Tucker Fisk, who nobody knows about, but hashtag Blue Devils pride. Let's go Tucker. Maybe he can improve on his 2 catches last year.
Yeah.
I still want to see what the Falcons do in the draft. I think they could add another receiver. I'm still a little bit worried about the Kyle Pitts experience for this next year. I don't think Justin Fields is necessarily the guy that you want if you want passing volume or anything like that, because that's been one of the big problems, that Kyle Pitts has actually been awesome in every efficiency metric. They just don't throw the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if that changes very much with Justin Fields. So I'm still a little bit concerned about London and Pitts. I think Bijan at this point really looks like the only Falcon that I'm getting excited about right now.
And Pitts is up there in top 10 in tight end targets. Yeah. The problem was not having catchable balls thrown to him. But you saw what Fields did with Kmet. He made Kmet a top 10 tight end 2 years in a row. So maybe that means great things for Pitts, or better things for Pitts anyway.
So Josh, I got a question for you then. Where does Pitts land in your like dynasty rankings there as a tight end? Like I know with all these new guys, these younger guys that are coming up, you got a Bowers in the draft. You have a Trey McBride who went off last year, Laporta going off. You got Njoku, Hawkinson. Like where does he fall in there? Like how can you rank him at this stage with so much variables in that Falcon offense?
Yeah, I've got him tight end 4 right now. I think Laporta, McBride, and Bowers should be ahead of him. I don't think he has a massive ceiling for this upcoming season. I like to win. I don't think he's going to help you win this year necessarily. I think he'll be better than last year, but you couldn't start him last year. So I think it should improve, but I don't know how many more years we can keep waiting for the quarterback. The team doesn't seem like they're particularly interested in him as a focal point of the offense. So I think it'll happen for him at some point. I just don't like valuing players where I think, all right, in 3 years, it's going to be awesome. I'd rather just try to do well earlier than that. And I think there's those three tight ends, I think, have similar long-term upside with more short-term upside as well. So I think the one thing that I'm worried about with Fields and Pitts is that Cole Kmet was pretty good last year, but he was in a very different role from Pitts. Pitts' average depth of target was significantly higher than Cole Kmet. So that's what worries me, is that Pitts' role has been very QB dependent, where he's running routes really far downfield out of the slot. And yeah, you generally need pretty good quarterback play. Like he's running farther downfield than like Cooper Kupp and Amon-Ra St. Brown out of the slot. It's not like he's just this slot receiver. He's actually like this run deep out of the slot. And then suddenly like quarterback play matters. You have to float the ball over the linebackers. And I think this might just be, unfortunately, another year of pain for the Kyle Pitts managers.
Yeah. Great analysis. I think that you broke that down really, really good, and how his position is actually affected by his quarterback play. And well done. So there's one more point here for the news, and that just actually happened within the last hour or so, is Alexander Mattison just got released from the Vikings. I don't have much details on that. You guys know any more information about that? Why the move was made?
Well, they came out yesterday and said that Ty Chandler was the go-to guy. So it set the stage for Madison to be released. And I say sell Ty Chandler. You're not gonna find him at a better value than he is right now.
Yeah, I think the Vikings draft someone or bring someone in free agency. If you're really gonna roll the backfield of Ty Chandler and Kene Nwangwu, props to them. That's not going to happen. So I assume somebody else that looks a lot like Madison, probably better, will be coming in shortly.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, now we're in the meat and the potatoes here of our show. We're going to talk about our.
I like man potatoes.
Me too. We're going to talk about our guys that we're going to have our eyes on in this combine. So, Josh, do you want to start us off with your first person that you're going to have your eye on in this combine?
Yeah, athleticism matters a lot at the tight end position. Let's see what we get out of Texas tight end Jatavian Sanders. Right now, he's being projected round 2 draft capital. He's built a lot like Dallas Goedert, 6'4", mid 250s, supposedly. Sophomore season, he did really well. 54 catches, over 600 yards, 5 touchdowns. Xavier Worthy, who should also be a day 2 pick in the NFL draft. Small, speedy receiver out of Texas. He led the team that year with 760 yards. So not that many more than Sanders when he was a sophomore. And then junior year, he was bumped down the depth chart and he finished 3rd on the team, though he had 682 yards. So more receiving yards, which we like. Bumped down the depth chart because not only was he competing with Xavier Worthy, he was then competing with Adonai Mitchell that year as well. Both of those guys probably going round 2 of the NFL draft. So I don't think we can really knock him for performing worse than those guys. The thing that I liked was that his yards per route run got better from his sophomore to his junior year. So while his target rate, his target share all went down a little bit with enhanced target competition, he was actually being a more efficient, probably better player. And his average depth of target went up pretty significantly, showing that this guy can run real routes like what the NFL is hopefully going to expect from him. Not saying that he's the next like Sam Laporta type, but just because he's getting round 2 draft capital doesn't mean he's toast. I think we've talked about this a lot before. Just any podcast that you listen to will be like, hey, There's a lot of first round tight end busts. There's a lot of second round tight end busts. We want athleticism, and we generally want a good landing spot because, as we've seen with Kyle Pitts at the tight end position, especially quarterback play, offense really matters because of how touchdown dependent they are. So let's see how he does at the combine.
Absolutely. I love Jatavion Sanders in Devy, and hey, go over to the Undroppables and check out my Devy articles where I have talked about Amari Neblack, who was Alabama tight end last year, transferred over to University of Texas, and he's going to pick up Jatavion Sanders snaps. Jatavion Sanders, two of the things that we look at in a tight end, number one is the 40 time. It looks like he runs a sub 4.6 40 time, so that's going to do real well for him. And the other is in a receiving scheme, who are your teammates? And with Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Worthy sharing targets with him, he certainly showed out and should have the ability to be productive in an NFL offense.
Awesome. Okay, Biggs, what do you got for your first one?
So my first one, and there's going to be a theme here. First one is going to be Luke McCaffrey. Now, this is the younger brother of Christian McCaffrey. It looks like he's going to come in about 6'2", 200 pounds. That's a kind of it's not the greatest BMI, simply because the weight is about 200. And so we're hoping that he comes in more close to 6 foot, 6'1". He's 23 years old. Age is certainly a factor at the wide receiver position, and he runs about a 4.45 to 4.55 40. So we're going to look for him to have a combine under 4.5. He's a legacy in the NFL. His dad was a 3-time Super Bowl winner. His brother is friggin' RB1 every year. So the athleticism is there. The legacy is there. He should be able to do good things in the NFL. What I'm going to be looking at specifically at his numbers on Saturday are his vertical jump, his bench press, and his shuttle time. Those tend to be three of the stickiest metrics as far as combine metrics go. So that's what I'm going to be looking for from Luke McCaffrey. And then after that, when we get closer to the draft, we're going to be looking at landing spot and draft capital.
For sure. Landing spot is such a huge thing in this, with this draft, especially. So I'll be looking at that as well. So for my first person that I'm going to be looking at, and I think a lot of people have this guy's name highlighted. They want to see what he can do. He showed out at the Senior Bowl, and Ladd McConkey is being crowned as the early best route runner in this class. And I have him up to my wide receiver 7 right now, only behind Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Adunze, Franklin, Thomas, Worthy. McConkey could easily move up here for me as well with a juicy landing spot. His route running ability has got to put him in the tier along with Worthy and Franklin and Thomas at minimum. His yards per route run was an impressive 2.54, ranking him 5th in this class. His 3.62 yards per route run in the regular season of 2023 was only second to Malik Neighbors. This is a metric that I put a lot of stock into it when evaluating these rookie prospects. So McConkey is also a fast, he's burner off the line. Thor was telling on the undrafted the other day that he was burning people off the line at the Senior Bowl. So I want to see what he can do at the combine too. I want to see what his speed score is. He's a smart player who can create after the catch and stretch the field on all levels. He won't win downfield as much or be a contested catch guru, but his football IQ and his route running prowess will garner Conkey at least, I think, second round, early third round capital. So keep an eye on him. He's rising up my boards. He probably has plateaued already, but he is my wide receiver 7 in this class so far.
I like him a lot.
All right, Josh, what do you think about your next one? Who's your next guy rising up, or somebody that you're looking at the combine?
I'm going to look at Tennessee running back Jalen Wright, currently projecting around 4th round draft capital. And I think a lot of that rests in his 40 time. He probably runs in the 4.3s at the combine. He needs that. That would put him in Elijah Mitchell, Keaton Mitchell, Raheem Mostert, Isaiah Pacheco territory. None of these guys are actually awesome running backs for the most part. They're just really, really fast. And there's always going to be a place in the NFL for fast running backs. Right now, he's listed 5'11", 200. That's Ty Chandler, who we just talked about a little bit earlier.
Yeah,
that's not really the size you want. That's more receiver size, But if you can have a 4.3 40 time like a Ty Chandler, like an Elijah Mitchell, then being tall and skinny is actually okay. He was pretty efficient on just over 10 carries a game these past 2 years in college. Last year, he had a couple of receptions a game to show that he's not a very good pass catcher, but he can at least do it. And that if he's back there, he doesn't have stone hands. An NFL team might actually throw him the ball occasionally. So I think we could be looking at the next Keaton Mitchell type where day 3 draft capital, elite speed, and you don't even need that many touches to be fantasy relevant like we saw with Mitchell, where the guy can have 8, 10, 12 fantasy points on very, very limited raw touch volume. So hopefully Jalen Wright gets us that mid to low 4.3s.
Yeah, and I think that his combine is going to be a really big indicator on where he's going to land. A lot of people have their eye on him. He could easily be like I've seen him go as some people's RB1 in this class, so it really will depend on where he lands in this combine and how he tests. That's a good one.
He's really a mercurial running back that's getting steamed up at the moment. A lot of people talk about some of his negatives, that he was not seeing boxes that were loaded and still wasn't great efficiency wise. But if he blows away the combine, most of that is going to fall by the wayside. You get NFL scouts watching him run, they're going to find the right spot for him, and he could be very productive in dynasty leagues.
For sure. All right, Biggs, who do you got next?
So my next one is another legacy, and that's going to be Brendan Rice. Mm-hmm. Now, I talked about him in our podcast about our Senior Bowl winners and losers. Brendan Rice is 6'3", 210 pounds. He's 22, so that age is a benefit, even though he was a 4-year player. There are reports that he can run a sub 4.3 40, which is very much faster than his dad, although he's not quite as big. He does have his father's work ethic. He does have his father's swag, and both of those things are going to go a lot for him. He's probably going to not earn draft capital, but have better draft capital because his last name is Rice and he's Jerry's son than maybe somebody who is comparable coming out of the NCAA. One of those things that we look at in wide receivers is who they were catching passes with. He caught passes with Jordan Addison, Taj Washington, and freshman standout Zachariah Branch. So he's had competition in the wide receiver room. He had a pretty good year last year, and I'm going to be looking for the same metrics that I was looking for with Luke McCaffrey. We're talking vertical, we're talking bench press, and we're talking shuttle. We need to know that he's strong on his frame. We need to know that he has good lateral movement and quickness, and we need to know that he has that explosive vert. I'm tracking Brendan Rice really, really hard.
Yeah, and I think his legacy is going to have a lot of eyes on him just based off his name value, and there's going to be people looking at him at the combine, 100%. So my next guy that I'm going to be looking at, and he had an impressive Senior Bowl, is in this running back class. There's just waiting for someone just to emerge, and I think Marshawn Lloyd could be one of those guys, especially if he gets a great landing spot. Lloyd is a great pass blocker. He's good at protecting Caleb Williams last year, and he will be on the field for passing downs. There are concerns about his fumbling issues that plagued his days with the Trojans. Lloyd also tore his ACL back in 2020 and was slow to recover from it. This is something worth noting, but has been baked into his price. Lloyd has the potential to be a starter in this league and has checked all the boxes for me, especially in a class that is so up in the air. I am more willing to take a chance on a running back that can also be a big factor in the passing game, and Lloyd has proven that. Lloyd is a monster on the ground with a true 3-down back potential. I'm projecting Lloyd to be a late second, early third round pick, which should position him well to not only crack an NFL roster, but be a solid contributor right out of the gate. His pass catching abilities will allow him to line up as a receiver on the line at times as well. So I'm pretty high on Marshawn Lloyd. Obviously, this is all fluid with landing spots, but I think he's a guy that I really have my eye on him moving forward.
I like Marshawn. I had him in Devi and got to watch him quite a bit. It breaks my heart as a Cal fan that we have so many USC guys on these lists, but that is what it is.
That's awesome. All right, Josh, what about your number 3?
I'm going to go with wide receiver Devontae Walker. Played last season out of North Carolina. currently projected round 2 draft capital. He is listed at 6'3", 175 pounds. That's tiny. We don't like that. The combine will be very important to figure out what his actual size is.
Yeah.
I certainly hope that is not his actual size. He's a 3-year player. The first 2 years, 2021, 2022, he was at Kent State. And 2022, he was really, really productive as a sophomore. He had the second most receiving yards in the MAC. He had the most touchdowns, 921 yards, 11 touchdowns. He was targeted on nearly 30% of his routes. His average depth of target was 16 yards downfield. So he is getting targeted at a crazy rate deep downfield. That's very, very hard to find. And he averaged over 2.7 yards per route run as a sophomore. Then he transfers to North Carolina. Who wouldn't want to play with Drake May? It's not very impressive, the total stats, 41 catches, 699 yards, 7 touchdowns. Then you realize they only played 8 games, and he actually averaged 87 yards per game, still targeted on over 20% of his routes, 23% from a new quarterback in Drake May. And his ADOT jumped to 18 yards downfield, still had a nice hefty 2.4 yards per route run. Anyone that is a field stretcher who's also commanding targets at a pretty high level, I'm going to be interested in, since that's where fantasy points come from. Mm-hmm. And we'll just see what the height weight is. And then I assume he's going to run around a 4.4. So if you get a guy that's actually like 6'2", 185 and runs a 4.4, I think we start to get very, very excited about the round 2 landing spot for Devontae.
Yeah, he could be a guy there too, especially at the combine. He's a guy that people have been lower on heading into the combine because of his separating issues and things like that. If he can post a good speed score, I think he'll rise right up the boards.
His game profile reminds me a little bit of Trey Tucker and Raiders' deep threat. So I just want to take a second real quick and just tell Mike, ha!
Whatever, Biggs. I had Tez Walker as a guy that it was a faller after the Senior Bowl for me for a couple reasons, like the separating issues and stuff like that. But yeah, I think he can definitely be a guy that at the combine will be looked at and could garner that second round draft capital. So depending on his situation and good coaching staff, he could be landing in a good spot. So
and Mike and I have a short history of disagreeing on players, most notably George Pickens. And when we did a dilemma video about George Pickens, and ADOT was one of the things that I pointed out about Pickens, and that went in my favor. I got to rub it in a little bit.
Yeah.
You finished 4th in the Larky League. I finished 9th. I got to have some victories.
All right, Biggs, let's get into your next one.
My next one is a running back, and his name is Amani Bailey. Now, for some reason, I have a thing for Horned Frogs running backs. Amani Bailey is coming out of TCU. I've seen reports that he's 5'7". I've seen reports that he's 5'9". So Saturday is going to be the tell. We're going to know exactly how tall Amani Bailey is, unless he's not invited. Can you check that real quick, Josh? He's 22 years old, so age is fine. Actually, let me go back. So 5'7" reports he will be there. Okay, so 5'7" is one of the reported heights. He might have grown in the last couple of years. He was a transfer to TCU from University of Louisiana, #Raging Cajuns. But at 207, over 200 pounds and under 5'9", 5'8", that BMI is going to be his path to glory. Top 15%. I think he's 84th or 85th percentile with his BMI. And he's also a sprinter. He ran track and he was the anchor for the 4x100. So you put a guy in like a muscle hamster body and give him sub 4.4 speed. If he runs in the 4.3s, and the metrics I'm looking at for running back, I'm looking at 3-cone drill first. That's interior maneuverability, shuttle. How is he going to be able to burst in small spaces? His broad jump, and then that BMI. Amani Bailey could tick all the boxes for me, as opposed to some of these other running backs that have more steam and be a total sleeper. I love Condre Miller, and in the same backfield as Condre Miller, Amani Bailey as a junior in 2022 averaged 8.1 yards per carry. So this could be the dynasty asset that you're looking for.
Awesome. All right. We're going to speed this along here. We want to make sure Josh gets on his timeline here. So let's get into our next one here. And that's for me. That's Jacob Cowing from Arizona. When looking at his profile, it reminds me and some analysts of Tank Dell. When watching Cowing, it is impressive to watch his short area quickness. And when he gets the ball, he can be a threat after the catch because how small and elusive he can be. If you've watched any of his tape, he is known to also hit the big play or two downfield. So he isn't just your typical slot wideout. He can play on all three levels of the field. He isn't bad in the red zone either because how quick he is. An impressive stat that I found that were only 4 wide receivers in this class to post a 90 plus PFF grade, and Cowing was one of them, only behind Harrison Jr., Neighbors, and Malik Washington, another receiver I have my eye on this year. There will always be injury and durability question marks for Cowing, just like the other smaller players now playing in the NFL like Devon A. Chan and Tank Dell. I found these stats from David Guerrieri on X, and it's pretty crazy how close Dell and Cowing actually profile coming out of college. Height and weight, they were both 5'8", 165. Their PFF grades were 89 and 90 respectively. Yards per route run, 2.5, 7 for Dell, 2.55 for Cowing. Their ADOTs were 11.8 and 11.7. Their yards after catch were 6.0 and 6.3. So Cowing is literally a carbon copy of Tank Dell. So if he gets a decent landing spot that understands how to scheme Cowing in the game, he should be a steal headed into 2024. That's my Jacob Cowing
Love
take.
me some Cowing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like him too.
Yeah, it just depends on his landing spot too. If he can get into a good situation, we'll see what happens. Josh, number 4. Who's your number 4 guy?
All right, guys, we're gonna dig deep on this one. We're gonna look at Dylan Lauby, New Hampshire Wildcats running back. He's listed at 5'10", 207. That's important. I hope he actually weighs in around there.
Yeah.
It would be a bummer. We see some of these small school guys, and next year they're 5'7", 190. So hopefully we're not being hoodwinked by the 5'10", 207. Probably goes on day 3 of the NFL draft as of right now, which is good. That there's at least some type of buzz behind him in mock drafts. The problem was he was a 6-year player in college. Let's unpack that. 2018, redshirt season. 2019, 54 carries, but more impressively, he got 26 passes for 367 yards. That's 14 yards per reception. That's elite for running backs. And he returned 29 kicks that year. 2020, COVID, he barely plays. The New Hampshire Wildcats football season was not on the priority list for COVID. I understand that. 2021, just 79 carries, 22 catches. So we at least see this change of pace back. And then 2022, he puts it all together. He has 245 carries and catches 49 passes for 464 yards. 2023, they realized, you know what, this is not a short yardage back. This is more of a out in space back. He's got some pretty good long speed. So his carries drops to only 158, but the receiving increases. And folks, this is not I'm not stumbling on words. He caught 68 passes for 699 yards and 7 touchdowns this past season. Whoever your favorite sleeper receiver is, there's a good chance that Dylan Lauby had more receptions and potentially more receiving yards and more touchdowns than that favorite receiver of yours this past season. He was invited to the combine, so we'll be looking to see what he's actually weighing in at, what he actually runs at. That's good for him that he had that attention. I'm hoping he runs between 4.45 and 4.52, and that if he can weigh around 205 or more, profiles rounded out, he certainly starts to look like an Evan Hull type, and you're like, oh, I could see why this would be a coveted dynasty asset that suddenly gains a little trade value. I think in terms of guys that have looked a little bit like this, that have done well, obviously Austin Eckler, but then you could also look at Kyron Williams, an undersized pass catching back. And I think Kenny Gainwell is actually a pretty good outcome. Some people are annoyed with Gainwell in dynasty, but he's had a lot of points where the values fluctuated up. And I wouldn't hate at all if Dylan Lauby turned out to be the next Kenny Gainwell, and that you get a nice little value spike and you sell him and you turn a little bit of a profit. So I'll be very, very curious to see how my favorite late round running back Dylan Lauby does.
Well, hopefully his comp is not that accurate with Gainwell, because I spent 3 years looking at Gainwell going, his usage is the problem. I love Dylan Lobby. I talked him up, and friends of the program will know that I had him as one of my combine winners. And I saw a kid at the grocery store the other day wearing a University of New Hampshire sweatshirt, and I said, "Hey, you go to UNH?" He goes, "No, my sister does." And I was like, "You play fantasy football?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Watch for Dylan Lobby. This kid is legit. He's coming out, and he's going to be part of the rookie drafts in Dynasty." So I've heard him comp to Danny Woodhead.
Yeah.
And I've also heard very, very many similarities with Amani Bailey. That puts us right on track. If he has a Danny Woodhead ceiling in the NFL, he's going to be productive and have some spike weeks in best ball. I really, really like Dylan Lobby.
Yeah, me too. I like that pick. Okay, Biggs, let's keep it rolling.
All right, let's go back to tight end, and we're going to go with Dallin Holker. Now, I was very surprised. I was in a couple of mock drafts with player profiler sharps, and a couple of them in the broadcast said that they didn't even know Dallin Holker's name. You guys out there, this is one reason that you want to get into Devy leagues, because the only reason that I knew who Dallin Holker was because I had him in Devy, and he was a mid-season free agent pickup for me. Now, Dallin Holker he's that new era, big slot, tight end body. He's 6'5", 235. He's somewhere size-wise in between Laporta and Musgrave. He's a little bit bigger than Laporta. He's not quite as big as Musgrave. You want to look at teammates. He was second in team yards to Devy Darling Torrey Horton, who's an absolute burner. So at Colorado State, Dallin Holker had a pretty productive season. He was the Mackey Award runner-up. That's a tight end award given to the best tight end in the country in college football. He led all tight ends in the NCAA in receptions and receiving yards, and he's coming from the same system with the same coaching staff, head coach and tight end coach, that made Trey McBride. Now, he's a little bit older. He took 2 years to go on a mission for his Mormon faith. So he's coming out about 25, 26 years old. But guess what? At tight end, age is not a corollary with success in dynasty football. So Dallin Holker, look for him to be, you can take a stab on him in your rookie drafts as like tight end 3. I have him as high as tight end 3, but a lot of people, again, don't even know his name. So if you want to fade him a little bit further than that, go for it. Sam Laporta, nobody was talking about last year. It was all about Dalton Kincaid and Michael Mayer, but who came out as tight end 1? Sam Laporta. Everybody's talking about Brock Bowers and Jatavion Sanders, which I get, and I definitely would draft those guys over Dallin Holker, but don't sleep on Dallin Holker.
All right, we won't. All right,
yeah, I nearly put him on the sheet, and then I saw he was there. So
yeah.
Also, he's actually not that old. He turns 24 in April. So
24. Okay.
Even with the 2-year mission trip, he's still currently 23. I was surprised too. I thought he'd be a lot older.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah.
He's 30. He's got he's got grandkids already.
I love it. All right, I'm going to do one more, and then we'll get into Josh's and yours last two, so we can get Josh out of here for his next show. So I'll do my last one, and then we'll get you guys to do your last two there, and then we'll end it off here. So I'm going to pick one out of my last two, and that's going to be Javon Baker. I am not a contested catch guy whatsoever, but Javon Baker is just different to me with such a great body control and the way he moves around so effortlessly. He is known to be a vertical threat that has trouble separating, and there are question marks about his top end speed. However, I'm hearing rumblings that Baker will clock somewhere in the 4.38, 4.42 range. And if he can do that, count me in. He would then be probably a day 2 pick at that stage. There are some intriguing metrics that pop out to me when digging deeper into his profile. His yards per route run are an exceptional both versus zone at 3.52 and man at 3.42 coverages. I love me some good yards per route run, meaning he's getting targeted at a high rate. And when you mix that all in with his success rate downfield, being a contested catch guy, I am in on Javon Baker at this price. Baker's ADOT is 17-point run, ranks 3rd, and his yards per reception is 21.9, which ranks him 1st. One of the big reasons Baker isn't being talked about amongst the bigger names that he struggled to crack the Alabama receiving room that included high NFL draft picks like Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, and Jamison Williams. So going to UCF allowed Baker to get into some games and was able to do enough to get the invite to the Senior Bowl, where Baker had a good showing. Javon Baker is a later round guy I am keeping my eye on and don't mind reaching on him in the later rounds. He is not going any late now. Like, I see him creeping up in these drafts now. So he's no longer being called a sleeper. He's on people's radar, and I love me some Javon Baker.
This wide receiver class is so freaking deep. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, agreed.
And I do want to give a quick shout out to Greinberg's last sleeper, Jonathan Brooks. Let's hope his combine height comes way low with his weight, because I want to see him with a pretty good BMI and the speed that he's got.
All right, Josh,
so
you have a second to finish off the show here with your last two, with yours and Biggs's last one here. Is that cool?
I was going to introduce it real quick, because we sent the show sheet out to Josh, and Josh came through, and his number 1 guy was Jalen Polk, and my number 4 guy was Jalen McMillan. And those were the 2 UW Husky Jalens this year, spelled differently, but still. So in the offseason, pre-2023, I wrote up Rome Odunze versus Jalen McMillan and what was going to happen with them. And I love Jalen McMillan's profile. And just like in 2022, I had him tabbed for a huge year in 2023. And he didn't hit the numbers because he got hurt and missed a bunch of games. But the profile is still there, and he came back and finished the season healthy. Plus, he's going to have the 2024 season to be fully recovered. So with that, we had dueling sleepers, both from the same national champion runner-up, and both outshone by receiving yards leader Rome Odunze. So go ahead and introduce Mr. Jalen Polk, Josh.
Yeah, Jalen Polk's currently projected for 2nd-round draft capital on the mock draft sites. McMillan's projected for 3rd round. I think that's pretty fluid. I could see it swapping, but hopefully both of them are day 2 picks. Polk's listed 6'2", 190. That's pretty good. He was fine from the start. His freshman year in 2020 was at Texas Tech. He finished 4th in receiving yards. He got some real considerable playing time. Transfers to Washington for the 2021 through 2023 seasons. He only played 3 games his first year at Washington in 2021. His first game, he caught 1 pass for 13 yards against Montana and got injured on that play. Reports said he would not return for the rest of the season. It was too bad of an injury. 2.5 months later, he comes back and he has 60 yards against Colorado in a game where Odunze had 68. Then he had 41 yards versus Washington State in a game where Odunze had 69. That was all he did in 2021 due to injuries. Then 2022, he's 3rd on the team behind Odunze and McMillan in receiving, nearly 700 receiving yards, targeted on 18% of his routes despite having 2 pretty solid guys there with him in his first full season at Washington. And his average depth of target was 16. Very, very far downfield. Yards per out run was almost 2, which is good. Then he takes a big step forward as a senior, and this is now everyone's 2nd season playing with Penix in that offense. And he ended up being the guy behind Odunze. He had 69 catches, 1,159 yards, 9 touchdowns. He was targeted on 22% of his routes to Odunze's 25, and his average depth of target was 14. So once again, healthy. Odunze had 3 yards per out run. We know it. All right. He's probably going to be a top 10, top 12 pick, but 2.35 yards per out run for Polk. So to be targeted on nearly as often as Odunze when lining up near him, I like that. And I think Polk at this point has a pretty good upside. If we can get a decent height weight like he's listed at, with hopefully something around the 4.4 to 4.45 range, then I'll be pretty excited about another guy that could be a high volume target with some field stretching ability.
Yeah.
What an embarrassment of riches the Huskies had this year. And I think by my count, that's 6 Pac-12 players in our list of 15. That's almost half, and none of them are Cal Bears. Come on, Jaden Ott. Come out as a junior, please. All right, I love the fact that Jalen Polk overtook Jalen McMillan, because that gives a little bit of fade to Jalen McMillan's name. People are going to be in on Jalen Polk, and that's totally fair. They're similarly sized. I have McMillan listed at 6'1", 190, which is just a little bit shorter than Polk is. He had a very productive 2022, like I said, over 1,000 receiving yards in that offense, with Odunze obviously being the alpha. He runs a sub 4.4, so he's pretty fast. Let's hope that he hits that in the combine. And we look at teammates, of course. He was in a passing scheme last season with Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, who hopefully will be drafted ahead of him, and Dylan Johnson, who was one of the premier pass-catching running backs in the NCAA this year. On Saturday, I'm going to be looking at his vert, his bench, his shuttle. And I've seen comps, NFL comps to him with Jalen Tolbert and Rashee Rice. Now, obviously, the Jalen Tolbert comp should be looked at as a floor. Hopefully, he's going to have a more productive career than Tolbert has so far in the last couple of years. But if he can break out as a Rashee Rice guy and take over one of the receiving cores wherever he gets drafted, he could have a whole lot of value in your rookie draft. So keep an eye on Jalen McMillan this weekend in the combine, and keep an eye on how far he falls in your rookie drafts, because he could be a very, very incredible late second, early third round value.
Sweet. That does it for episode 5 of the Dynasty Pulse. Josh Larky, what a honor to have you on our show, man. You've been such a great addition to this show today. Like, awesome job. Thanks for coming on. You want to just reiterate where everybody can find your work and stuff?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Larky Tweets on Twitter. Nice and simple. You'll be able to see all my work there. And in the Player Profiler podcast feed, the Dominator comes out each week. So be on the lookout for that. Next week, I'll have former coworkers of mine, Ryan Reynolds and Jordan Vanek, on the pod, and we're going to recap some of the lesser talked about storylines from the combine and discussing what stuff actually matters to us in terms of players whose stock might fundamentally change, and some of the players that are getting potentially overhyped based on combine performance. So
yay
on next week.
I love overhype. I'm all about market inefficiencies. So steam guys up who are going to do great, and let's get the narratives flowing so that I can snipe everybody in the last rounds of my rookie drafts.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining the Dynasty Pulse on the Fantasy Football Plus Network. Thanks, Josh Larky, for our special. Next week, we have another big name guest. Dave Kluge is going to be joining us from the Football Guys, so be sure to tune in for that one as well. And from all of us at the Fantasy Football Plus Network, we'll see you next time. Hope you win.
Yay.